Right. Happy to see you all. Morning, noon, and night, wherever we are. I see England is here. Liverpool is here. Paul, Aline, hello, darling. Everybody's here. Lena, Trish, Alvarez. That's your first name, isn't it? Is that right? Alvarez.
Yeah, Alvarez is my first name.
Alvarez. Okay, that sounds like an American pronunciation.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, people. Let's just, for 1 hour, let's just talk about a few things, see if anything triggers in our mind. See anything can be, any advice from Buddha's teachings can be useful. I mean, I'm the mouthpiece, so let's hope that what comes through my mouth, Buddha's teachings, something comes through my mouth, my mind, that triggers for all of us, because I'm listening just like you people, I promise. Because I have to speak it, so I'm hearing it very clearly, trying to understand it as I say it, to try and interpret Buddha's teachings so we can take it as advice, so we can develop our amazing minds, our incredible potential. There's nothing remotely like it in modern psychology. Why? Because that's our true nature, as Buddha says, this ability to be free of the rubbish and full of the goodness. He says that's who we really are. So that finally, also, because one of the consequences of all the neuroses is that we feel separate from others. So breaking down all the neuroses and getting rid of them, which is the benefit of this advice, helps us get closer to others. Then we realize, oh my goodness, we're all in the same boat. So we try to help others. That's the bottom line, really. For this reason, we think we're together. So it's not wrong to say that every piece of advice in all of the Buddhist epistemologies, philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, blah, 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 all these fancy Greek words, for the views coming from the Buddha, and anybody who has proven to be true what the Buddha said is the way it is, has become a Buddha too. It's all about the mind. It comes down to the mind, comes down to the mind. And what it means is it comes down to how we see things. That really is the essence of the way of saying it. When we talk about, when you study the Buddhist model of the mind, when you go into more detail and study it in more depth, and it really is quite extensive. And again, always reminding us, where does it come from? Not from on high. Buddha didn't make it up 2,500 years ago. He'd come out of this incredible tradition before him, which is rich and amazing and incredible. And these amazing Indian yogis, they already mapped the mind. I mean, the map of the mind that Buddhism uses, the basic view of what the mind is coming from these Indians. Okay, Buddhism's got its own take on it. It just didn't come out of the blue when he popped up, So because when we say the mind, we think of something very solid, like the physical thing called the brain. That's fine, we have a brain. But we're not discussing that here. Buddha doesn't discuss the brain. That's not his expertise, He's discussing, like, it's very subjective. And that's a difficulty thing for us in our culture. I think psychology is like on the lowest of the totem pole of all the sciences. I think it's because it's too soft. We like the hard sciences, a thing called a brain, neuroscience, a thing called physical. We like that suits our minds. But the Buddha's view is the opposite. He's discussing not the brain. He's discussing the actual subjective, internal, cognitive process itself. So I think it's one of the first, when you study the epistemological model of the mind, which is the way the mind functions. And I swear to you, it's so complex. I know when I first studied, I haven't got a clue what they're talking about, and I've forgotten a lot of it. But when I read it all again, it is quite extremely detailed, extremely complex, incredibly fascinating, the way this model of the mind describes the actual way, for example, the conceptuality functions. It's super incredibly fascinating, I swear to you. It's utterly fascinating. But one of the key things that I find so powerful when you study the epistemological model of the mind, when you study the way mind functions, the way our cognition functions, one of the first ways of looking at it is we divide into sensory and sensory and mental. And this is hugely important. This is massively important to understand if you want to try and really use, precisely and correctly Buddha's advice, So Lama Yeshe says we make the body the boss. And it's such a wonderful way to put it. In other words, we are driven by, we practically identify as being our sensory, a sensory being. Now we have a body, we have senses, they are powerful. They're the interface between us and the universe, is it not? In fact, the entire world, in terms of the senses, the entire universe is basically the 5 sense objects, the things we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. Then, okay, you've got, the way they talk, they often refer to the 6 senses. Well, technically, of course, mental consciousness, which is thoughts, is not sensory, but how they talk about it, then they say there are objects of each of those, so the objects. So the first thing, before we even go further, let's look at what Buddha means by the mind, the word mind. How is it defined? What's the definition? What's its function? Before we begin to discuss, we've got to understand that. Otherwise, we're up in different traditions, we're up in different views, So the mind is that which knows, that which is aware, that which cognizes. These words are like synonymous, these verbs. To know. The job of the mind, the job of a cup is to hold my tea. The job of a light is to shine light in the dark. The job of my eyes is to see something. So then, so the mind, in general, the mind is to cognize. And this is really central in Buddhism. As I often talk when we're discussing, especially ultimate reality, the definition of something that's existing and existent is that which can be cognized by mind. So this is axiomatic for the Buddha, which is really putting the mind right in the center, not some secondary thing. The Buddhist view finally is you can't possibly look at an external phenomenon without understanding the cognition. Not possible. And this is finally the teaching of Buddhism. There's no intrinsic nature in anything. So, okay, but here the point I want to make is this, and this is day-to-day life application. This is so powerful when we understand it. The difference between our sensory experiences and our mental experiences. I always use the same example, but it's really great, it's so clear. So first of all, we've got the senses, we have mental. So a typical thing, I always use a similar example, my thermos. I've got my thermos. It's always got I talk about tea, but it's always hot water in here, actually. I just had my tea, my nice chai with 2, I'm trying Irish tea at the moment. Irish tea from Trader Joe's. It's very delicious, very black. So I'm 2 big fat Irish black tea bags, and this kind of this mix of kind of chai stuff, and this latest non-milk thing I'm trying by the company called Ripple, and it uses pea protein. It's very delicious. It's got no extra sugar. It's very nice. Anyway, there's my cup of tea. Okay, put it all together, stick a bunch of honey in it, and there's my cup of tea. Just had that. I can't have more than one of those a day. I'll go berserk. So the rest of the day I calm it down by putting hot water in my body. So here's my thermos and I'm holding it water. So normally the world, this is how we live our lives. Listen to this. This is how we live our lives. I look here, and this is how when I went online. When I went online to buy a thermos, because the last one I left it behind or dropped it or something happened. And I like my thermos. Especially when I was traveling, I needed it. Now I'm not traveling, but still I like it. So I'm looking for one. And what causes me to choose, this is the point, what causes me to choose the thermos, and we're all like that, you choose the one that looks good. I mean, online, you can't touch it yet. You can't smell it. You don't know how good it is to hold the tea hot, but you go by the visuals, isn't it? Visuals are really powerful. Visuals grab you, the first line of defense. First line of meeting something is the visual. Okay, if you're blind, it'll be the ears. And if you're blind and deaf, it's the tactile, whichever one it is, right? Or smell. But for me, it was the visual, completely the visual. So I go by the one I think is a good design. So there is my thermos. So naturally, I will say that it's a really nicely designed thermos, And we all take that for granted. So we assume, and this is not just technical. This is not just kind of intellectual. It's not just semantics. This is massive if we can apply this in our daily lives. So I'll say, what a well-designed thermos, what a pretty thermos, So the point is though, what part of my mind is cognizing that? We've got 2 parts. We've got the sensory and the mental. Massive, sensory and mental. So my eyes are the first one. My eye consciousness. So this is the Buddhist way of putting it. Eye consciousness, which is your mind, which is not physical. Through the medium of the eyeball, the eyelid being open, the light being on, all the other various conditions, but crucially internally, the physical components all working nicely. My eye consciousness cognizes. Now, precisely what does it cognize? The way the Buddhism talks, and Lama talks about this in Mahamudra Lama Yeshe, that mind is like a mirror, and and this is so fascinating. We don't think of mind this way. Mind in general is like a mirror, and it reflects whatever it sees, whatever it cognizes, whatever it hears, whatever it thinks about. It merely reflects. It's a really interesting way to put it. So how does I consciousness cognize? What does it cognize? What does it reflect? It reflects precisely shape and color, nothing more. Can't possibly cognize more than mere shape and color. It can't work that out. There's no conceptuality. It's like very narrow, limited capacity for cognition. Now it's a shock to us, especially when it comes to tactile consciousness or music. When I hear one note of Miles Davis, I bliss out. So what's going on here? Well, what's happening is this. The millisecond, because we're so programmed in this from countless lives, Buddha says, become programmed with all this habituation, totally primordially instinctive, most of what we do with our senses and how we respond to them. So we don't notice the process. It's so quick. It's like a millionth of a second. So within a millisecond, virtually simultaneously, it feels like that, but there is an order. My mental consciousness is accessed. Now, what's your mental consciousness? That's where the workshop is, as Lama Yeshe puts it. That's where the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the unconscious, the subconscious, the chaos, the misery, the psychosis, the love, the bliss, the joy, you name it, baby. Everything is in your mental consciousness. And that's what we have to sort out. That's what we have to sort out. All the facts from the fiction, work out the pieces of the mind, what does which piece. And that's what's crucial if you're seriously trying to apply Buddhism in your life, to understand the technology of it. I mean, you can love a garden, you can love cakes, and you can have everybody else make your cake in your garden. But if you want to make your own cake and make your own garden, you can't just love cakes and gardens. You've got to know the technology. It's sort of logical. So same here. So quicker than Google, and I always mean this, quicker than Google, I promise you, my mental consciousness is accessed. And then now, because the Buddha would say everything we've ever seen, tasted, touched, smelt, thought of since beginning of this time is programmed, is simply kind of in a bare bones way, just simply held in our mind as memories. Held in our mind as memories. It's like one Lama said, it's like we're shooting a movie all day, and every second, everything's just stored in the mind. And then we meet it again later, we'll remember it. So now the other part of the mind, of course, is the karmic process, which is the qualitative one, where you have interpretations of it and opinions about it. So the point is this is what's coming now. The millisecond my eye consciousness sees that shape and color, in a millisecond quicker than Google, my memory is accessed. Up comes the concept thermos. I recognize, up comes the concept black. Up comes the concept by seeing my eyes, seeing that shape and that color, and then the shape, then because of my own views that I've developed over the years in this life, let's say, what I like, what I don't like, labeled good design. So looking at all the millions of things I've looked at, and I've decided this one is preferable, that's better than this is that. All this incredibly complex process that goes on. This amazing, we're not discussing the brain here, we're discussing the subjective cognitive process itself, which of course depends upon the brain, but that's not Buddha's expertise. It's the actual consciousness, the thoughts and feelings and emotions themselves. That's your mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. So the mental consciousness basically is full of opinions, concepts. It's got a subtler level. When you study the epistemological model, you learn about how you can get single point of concentration in meditation. This brilliant technique these Indians invented 3,000 years ago. And that's when you access a subtler level of your cognition, which we don't even posit as existing in our culture. That's your mental consciousness too, but it's beyond consent. So the level we live at, and that's the point, including all our emotions, all our rage, all our love, all our joy, all our bliss, all our suffering, all of that is conceptuality. This is a big shock to us. But essentially, so what's concepts? Thoughts. What's a thought? Actually, if you really be rational about all the thoughts, they are simply opinions. So that is a black thermos. We wouldn't say that's an opinion. You see, this is where it's very interesting. We would say that's a fact. But excuse me, what's a fact? A fact, when you're first established, we agree in the English language that black is the sound referring to that particular shape. It's very interdependent. So we decide it is called black. Conditions externally manifest as that, and we label it black, Everything is like that. Now, if I'm angry with my boyfriend and I'll say he is so evil, that's an opinion, but it happens to come along with a lot of physical energy because it's a very strong opinion based on my ego. But that's an opinion. That's an opinion. That's a viewpoint. It's a thought. It's a concept. This is so crucial to understand. So the Buddha talks about all these as being the disturbing emotions, and they have this aspect of being thoughts, So he says some of them are just up ridiculous. Some are completely extreme and have no real basis in reality. So what happens is the black thermos, fact, black, fact. They're facts. conventional facts. But even before that, we still decide that they're that. And so that in the end, even that is a thermos is an opinion, but we happen all to agree upon it, that it is a thermos, and we buy into that, and we tick the box and we agree. But then that's the trouble. It becomes then it becomes for us, the Buddha says, a concrete fact, a concrete absolute fact, and we over-exaggerate its black thermosness. That's a more subtle level. But so we've got facts and we've got fiction. And even at the conventional level, that is correct, that it's a black thermos, but it still comes from the mind deciding it's that. And it still functions as that. But where the trouble is, that's not going to cause us into too much trouble, is when I become attached to it. Whereas my boyfriend's thermos and we share it, and I adore my boyfriend, when he leaves me, I suddenly hate my thermos as well. We'll chuck it in the bin or throw it after him when he leaves. Suddenly the thermos will look ugly now because I've imposed another opinion upon it, an ugly thermos. So we're running in our lives being like demented maniacs, making up all these extreme stories all the time. Now, what part of our mind does that? It's the mental consciousness that the poor senses are very limited in their capacity. When you hear that sound, I always use that example because I like music. I like jazz, for example. And I like Miles Davis. So the second one note I'm a trumpet, I'll recognize Miles, you know. And straight away, my opinions go bonkers, as we say in England. You completely go exaggerated. Wow, amazing, so special, you know, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I don't think I'm having an opinion. I don't think that's an opinion. This is our incredible problem. I think it's the absolute truth. This is how we all go crazy. This is the fundamentalism of the delusion, the way Buddha's talking. So the point I'm getting at various points, but the key first one is, you know, your senses are limited. But because we so interpret, why do we over exaggerate this is the point too. Why do we over exaggerate the power of the senses? Because the senses are, like I said, the doorway for us to have any experience whatsoever. So we rely upon them terribly. And then in the mental consciousness, one of the really neurotic, exaggerating emotions, as we all know, Buddha calls it attachment, which is this first of all, this primordial emotional hunger. Because why are you hungry? Because you feel empty. What do you feel empty of? Everything. You don't feel you're enough. I'm not enough. I don't have enough. So what do? We have to look outside to get something. And that's attachment's job, to find the object of the five senses such that when we have contact with it, pleasure is triggered. Now that's a fact. That's a fact. When I hear that Miles Davis, that trumpet, it's my sensory, first of all, hears it, then my interpretation, Miles Davis, then my next interpretation based on attachment, then getting out of control, divine, delicious, wonderful, Miles Davis, and then because of all the energy getting excited, and they describe this in very great detail in the Vajrayana teachings, the technology of the way we think and feel based on the Vajrayana model of the the four elements. So then pleasure is triggered. A feeling of pleasure is triggered. But what's so fascinating, you know, when I was a radical feminist, in my political days, I was a radical feminist. And at that time, I was a very radical feminist, so I didn't want to listen to any male music. So I was not turned on by Miles then. I didn't even listen to Miles, screw Miles, you know, he was a man. I'm not joking, I'm just giving you an example. So because I had aversion in my mind, believe me, no pleasure was triggered. So you can really see how it's the sense we especially think of when we think of sexual pleasure, what we call sexual pleasure, which we always assume is the most intense pleasure. It's just the term we use for it. I don't know who first made up the word sex. I've got no idea. Probably some clever German person using Latin or Greek. Always turn everything to Latin and Greek to make it fancy, you know, so funny. Whoever made that term up, I don't know. How long it's been around, I do not know. But all it's referring to, this is the Buddhist analysis, is a very delicious feeling of pleasure. But we all mix it up with all the attachment of the divine person and this and that, and then the love and then the house and the babies. We've got all this other stuff around it. We can't get into the facts of what's going on, you know. So then there is the capacity for the human being, based on the way we're structured, to have pleasurable feelings. And they're neither good nor bad. They're not negative. They're not positive. It's just the way we're built. But the way we get those pleasurable feelings is by relying upon the objects of the senses, because that's our doorway to them. We haven't got enough subtle, we haven't got enough ability to access things directly mentally. So we've got to rely on our senses. Then mental kicks in and makes up a story. And then pleasure kicks in, and then we get all excited. And then we believe the story. That boyfriend is the cause of all my happiness. He is completely divine, from his head, from his tip of his toes to his head. You know, he's divine. Everything about him is divine. His toenails are divine. His hair is divine. His smell is divine. I mean, we know this. We go bonkers, we go mad with attachment. And we can't work out which bit is doing what, you know. And then we think it's some gift from God or something. So we've got to analyze all the bits that are playing, all the bits that are playing their roles. The senses do their job, but we give all this power to the senses, and we call those feelings sensory. There's a sensory component there, yeah, but much of it's coming from the mind. Like when you're in love with somebody, you get so excited you can't believe it. When you hate them because they've given you up for a younger version, there's no pleasure in your mind whatsoever. There's only unbelievable pain. So it proves it can't be coming from the object, and it proves it can't be sensory. Only sensory. We give all that. So the senses have their job. They're the doorway, and then from that second on, the mental conscious kicks in and starts doing all its stories. So that's why, as Lama says, the workshop is in the mind, meaning the mental conscious. That's what we have to start to learn to unpack and unravel, because that's the source in there of all our opinions, our crazy ones, our valid ones, our good ones, our ridiculous ones, our happiness, our suffering, our dramas. We have to look in there. I mean, we're beginning to do that in our culture since Freud. It's good being our own psychotherapist. Great. But I have to say, what little bit that I know about Buddhism and these Indians before him, they're really expert at this. This has been around 3,000 years, this approach, We didn't invent it. And the super clear, precise presentation of what this cognitive process is and how it functions. It's kind of a revelation when we start to study it. And then we use that, of course, as the basis for working out our own nonsense. We can distinguish the facts from the fiction. It's so important. So, of course, we've been talking, and we often, the first level of teachings, they mainly emphasize the suffering of attachment based on the attachment to the grossest the sense objects, including the person, including the cake, whatever it is. But when we start to know our mind even more, much more deep, keep looking at our mind, understanding attachment, we're going to start to see, and this is taught in the Bodhisattva path, they talk about the 8 worldly dharmas. I know when I first heard this term, I thought, I don't know what they were talking about. I didn't even bother looking into it. But all it is looking at attachment at a more subtle, more nuanced level, So this is showing really the Buddhist analysis of how we are driven by attachment. It pervades our mind. And even our bodies are the product karmically of attachment. So it's so pervasive, we can't escape it in a sense, but we are capable of it. That's what Buddha's talking about, liberation. We can get past it. But we have to understand it. So the deeper level, which runs in everybody's life, but we don't pay much attention, and we can't pay much attention to the subtle levels until we've dealt with the grosser levels. If you're just shoving the cake in all day, you've got no ability to look at the sensitivity of your own attachment and how you're craving other things at a subtler level. So let's look at this other level, subtle level. So the pair, the two that are really, the one that I find so fascinating, and I think they say this is the closest to ego grasping, which is the root delusion. They say it's the last delusion to go. And they call it in the text, it sounds so silly, it sounds very abstract, attachment to reputation. Well, that sounds like you want to get out there and write news, in the newspapers and have a good reputation. No, it's more subtle than that. It's every millisecond, every day since you're born. Since we're born, we've had this constant craving, ever so subtle and continuously there, since we're tiny, is playing out. That's why it's beyond volition. But it's all programmed. So since we're tiny, we've been observing, mummy, we're a little baby, and mummy, we see this smile, we get the energy that she's happy with us, and whatever it is that we just did, we've programmed ourselves, oh, that worked, I'll do it again. Then if mummy's get angry next day and she punches you in the nose, you get no wonder you get confused. You get all the wrong messages back from mummy, 1 minute what you did made her happy, next minute what you did made her suffer. No wonder we're neurotic. But if, but there's constant yearning in us. And in our culture, I think we don't, in our psychology, we treat this need to be approved of as a crucial component in the development of ourselves as a person. In other words, we even define ourselves as social beings, and that assumes we only become a proper person in relation to others. This is very fascinating. Now, from the virtuous point of view, love and compassion, this is absolutely true. Relationships are, we are related to others. But Buddha's looking at the analysis of the unhappy aspect of this craving to be connected to others. And this is this attachment called, this is hunger, this emotional hunger. There's 2 pairs there. There's 2 lots. One is to be praised. One is to hear nice words with your name in them, praise. But the other one is approval. It's more subtle. And you can see they play out together, I mean, look at the pain we experience when someone simply says, Robina, that wasn't, that criticize, not even brutally. There's instant defense, instant hurt. How dare you think that? I did not do that. I am not thinking that way. We hunger to hear our name. Even if we have a slightest amount of praise, We're just dying to hear more. Which doesn't mean it's not good to praise people. It is so good. Mothers must adore their babies and praise them and love them, but not neurotically, up and down like yo-yos, reasonably, learning to help them understand what works and what doesn't with good ethics. So we're talking about the neurotic part of us. So since we're tiny, we've been yearning, hungry to be approved. Now think that. And even a more simple way of putting that is we're hungry to be liked. This sounds so shocking to even think that's a problem. Utterly, it's the most normal thing in the universe. But to hear it as a delusion sounds very shocking. So we should be careful to look at it. And you've got to ask the question then, why would I be hungry, needy, looking for out there someone to say, Robina, you're a good person? Think about this. Just think of it so simply. We so take it for granted. Why? Because I don't believe I am. Think like that. Imagine it. And that's the irony of attachment. Attachment is like misery, never satisfied, never good enough, never have enough, never am enough. No matter what I get, not enough. No matter how much my boyfriend tells me he loves me, never enough. It's a terrible feeling of not being, not having. That's the aching pain of the energy of attachment. So of course then, if there's a sense that I'm just in myself not enough, and we don't articulate this, then of course we're dying. Mummy comes along and we need her to approve of what we do before we do it. We need her approval. Now this is really pervasive and multi-layered in us, This is why, even you could argue in the Buddhist philosophical view, the whole idea of a dualistic sense of a me and a you, which of course is the world is made up of me's and you's, but the Buddha says it's a part of the delusion. It's a mistake. And it's coming from ego grasping. And this attachment to be seen is the closest, the deepest attachment and the one that's closest to ego grasping. So the assumption is I'm just not enough as I am. So therefore, that's why we're cautious, why we're fearful, when we're worried. Did I do the right thing? I don't know. Because we're needing approval. We can't even take it. Some people, the suffering is so bad, we can't do anything. We're terrified. Why? Because we're terrified of being disapproved of. We're terrified of doing the wrong thing. And so we have guilt. What's guilt? I did the wrong thing. And you're looking around waiting for someone to punish you. God, mummy, daddy, the judge, anybody. No wonder we go mad. This is far more powerful than attachment to bodies, just plain old physical things, It's so subtle in the mind. And then, of course, because of this, this is the main play in our voice. This is the main play in our head. Always this fear of not being seen, fear of not being good enough, of what nobody loves me. And so it plays out in different ways. One is just incredible low self-esteem. One is in utter depression. One is in loneliness. This is a really interesting one, which is pervasive in our culture. People are lonely. They do have nobody to talk to. They do not have family. It is true. But we look at the cause of it as having not people to be there to love you. And we don't look at the subtler problem. The subtler problem is that we're not enough on our own. We assume that's the truth. But the Buddha says that's one we have to question, because he says we are enough on our own, which doesn't mean we don't have friends, because the irony is when you've healed yourself, when you've given up attachment, when it's like you've become a whole person, which means a content person, a fully developed, marvelous, fulfilled, joyful person. Don't think these words are religious. This is literal. And that's when you get that when you've lessened attachment. First to the cakes and the music, then to this craving to be seen and approved of, because you don't any longer, when you're satisfied, you don't need that thing anymore. So satisfaction sounds like a boring word, but that's the consequence of giving up attachment, giving up this emotional hunger. So when you've given it up to some degree, you become more fulfilled, and therefore there's no craving to be seen and heard by others. And that's to the point where you feel you're nothing, just because the fact that there's no one there to say hello. That's why people need their animals and their dogs and their cats. People get satisfaction even just having a dog look at you with his little eyes and wagging his little tail. Nothing wrong. But that shows how hungry we are. Even if you're seen by a cat, you feel like you're worthwhile. I'm not being rude to cats. It just shows the depth of the nothingness inside us, the belief that I'm nothing, because you're not nothing. You are something amazing. Everybody is, but it's the belief I'm nothing. So the hunger, that's why people are so sad and lonely during COVID-19, don't know what to do with their minds on their own. We understand this, but this is Buddha's analysis, and it's quite a subtle one, and it's a revelation, and we can hear it, because the job is for us to heal ourselves. Yes, have friends. Yes, have beloveds. We have to learn to know how to have them properly, though. Not just eat them up for breakfast and use them. And that's the trouble in our very intense relationships, whether it's mother and child. It's one component, one way it manifests, but the other one is in our so-called love relationships. That's when it's really a minefield, you know. When we talk about sexual attachment, sexual pleasure, we get so mixed up with all the components. So if we analyze, so if we understand the technology, the Buddhist view of how the senses work, the physical, the experience through the tactile consciousness of pleasure, of course, is the most intensive, more than just the eyes, more than just the ears, more than just the taste. Depends on the person, of course. So naturally contact with objects of the senses in that sense, being a human being, because there's a lot of other, see, there's so many more things involved when you have a relationship with a human being. I mean, cakes don't care if you shove them in or put them down the toilet. Humans do. So there's more to it. There's more complicated when it comes to attachment to a person. But the senses are still involved. You see that shape. You see that the eyes see the shape. And then because attachment starts to grow, then you just go berserk in describing that divine person, and they look divine. They're shining almost, you know. That's the function of your attachment to the shape and color called the person. But all the other stuff is mixed in there as well, you know, including the virtues. There's love there. There is compassion. There is love. There is all the good stuff there. We're not discussing that. We're discussing the workings of the rubbish. So we have to ask the question, you know, when you've, let's say you've got all this attachment, you get all excited, you think of the cake, you're going to work out the cake, you go to the restaurant, you go in, and they've got no cake left. So the more attachment, first of all, the attachment function, just simply speaking, and this is exactly the same for the body, just the attachment. First is, haven't got enough. What's missing? This aching feeling. Then you think, oh, cake, the light bulb goes on, you get all excited. And now it switches from dissatisfaction to anticipation. Anticipation, and you build it up and exaggerating it, thinking of it divine, you imagine it, you taste it, you think of it, you smell it, you work out the map, where to go on Google, which restaurant, you get there, you're building up, and they haven't got the damn cake. So what happens? The bubble bursts, doesn't it? And you get angry, how dare you not have my cake? Or depressed, oh my God, they're getting my cake again, I'm so hopeless. Oh my God, whatever. I mean, this is a mini example, we all understand it, you know. So there's disappointment when attachment is thwarted. Or if you do get the cake and you get the cake and it's so delicious and you keep eating and suddenly you want to vomit. So either way, not getting the cake, it crashes into despair and disappointment. And getting the cake, it crashes into despair and disappointment. You can't win, okay? Now, what about the human being? What else is involved? It's very fascinating. What else is involved? Well, this is the attachment to reputation. You don't get the cake to approve of you. Couldn't care, you know, just shove it in. Who cares what the cake thinks? But a person, wow, this is a whole nother dimension. And why we call sexual attachment, especially when it's a relationship, not just, you know, I mean, even an overnight. That's the same. Attachment to reputation is playing a massive role there. Because if a person looks at you, okay, you know, the person looks at you and the eyes see that shape, and you look at them and the eyes see their shape, and because you've got some karmic connection, suddenly the excitement starts, doesn't it? And then the seducing starts, then the manipulating, and the bottomless pit of the craving to be approved of now is running rampant. But we confuse it with sexual pleasure. No, not like that. It's mainly the mind. It's mainly the mental consciousness. This hunger. And so because some person's looking at you, they're dazzled. And then, you know, you're seducing each other. It's like, it's really shocking. When you don't like a person and they start doing this to you, you want to punch them in the nose. You hate them. It's so disgusting. Or if you see two people doing it and you're really depressed and hate relationships, you wish they'd go away with their disgusting kind of rubbish, you know, playing with each other and seducing and laughing and smiling. This is attachment to reputation going mad, out of control. And so you're seducing and you're seeing him look at you and he's getting excited because he sees you looking at him and you both just go bonkers. You don't remember the conversation. This is attached to a reputation. You're being seen by each other and suddenly you light up and you become divine. You get this feeling, I'm a goddess, because he's looking at you like a goddess. I mean, it's like incredible. So that can be marvelous, because we can use then love and compassion, and we can have a close relationship, and we can help each other become better human beings by utilizing all that. But we usually can't use it. We just go mad. But we don't even know what it is. We just call it sexual. It's too gross, you know. It's not that. That's why when relationships, when one day you start to feeling it going, and the nightmare, isn't it? Once it starts to fade, the nightmare, the panic, the despair, when you realize he's no longer looking at you the same way. This is the worst pain in the universe, when you stop being seen. You stop being seen as and then what happens? You believe his picture because he's not seeing your divine. So now you feel like a creep. You feel like a self-loathing person, and you go kill yourself. This is how fragile we are. This is how hungry we are. This is the attachment to reputation. To be loved, to be seen, to be heard, because we can't see ourselves. So what happens if you have what happens if you're this bodhisattva? Let's just say you're a bodhisattva. You're an amazingly high being with incredible compassion, no ego, you've given up attachment. What happens? Think about this. What happens? You don't suddenly become frozen overnight. You don't stop having sensory consciousness. You don't stop seeing shapes and having feelings. You have even more joy, more bliss, because your mind is not deluded. So due to some karma, you've chosen to be a bodhisattva. So you've got some karma to be born. To be married to some girl or something or whatever. You're a girl or a boy. Then some boy comes along and you're a girl bodhisattva, and you like boys in this case. Then it'll be the same thing. You'll have some karmic connection. You'll be close. You'll give each other joy. But you won't be having all this revolting yearning and craving, It'll still be working. That's how we were talking about the classes we're having on Tantra. You're able to understand technically what's going on. So you utilize that joy, but you're not thrown by it. You're not hungry for it. You're not like a junkie for it. It's clean and joyful. And it's based on love and compassion. When you give up attachment, your tongue doesn't stop functioning. You'll put the cake in the mouth, but you're no longer deceived by the cake. You're no longer in its thrall. But your tongue still works, and because your mind's more clear, you'll have far more joy. You'll enjoy it far more, but you won't be thrown by it. So you get the best of both worlds, So there's a multitude of things going on in our mind, is all I'm getting at. This is what being your own therapist means. Unpacking and unraveling to a degree of brilliance and subtlety and clarity that we do not have with respect in our modern psychology. So what about asking me some questions now? If you'd like to.
Madam Robin, I have a question in the chat.
Good.
Someone is asking, how do you detach without getting entangled emotionally?
I don't understand, because detach means you're getting unentangled emotionally. So I don't quite get, maybe you'd like to ask it in another way, please. I really want to understand. You mean, detachment means you're getting unentangled emotionally, if you're using the word in that way. So you need to ask me in another way, please. I'd really like to know what you mean, or just say it to me, if you'd like to.
I asked Robina, and
Oh, Deborah, talk to me, darling.
hi, Robina. It's like, for example, if you're a very sensitive person and just words affect you, or if somebody that you really love is ill and you're trying to help them, but you sort of care, all their pain, all their emotions.
That's right. Okay, now I understand you. Now I understand very clearly, Deborah. So basically what you're saying is, how do you learn to have love and compassion and empathy with somebody without becoming emotionally neurotic? That's what you're asking, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect question. Okay, good. This is the real trick, Deborah. And this is why in the Buddhist view, how we talk all the time, especially the Tibetan packaging of all of Buddhist teachings, the teachings, how to apply the teachings are very incremental, they're very gradual, they're very progressive. So the first level of practice, which is very much about the way we're talking here, about knowing our own mind, learning to know our own selves, dealing with ourselves, understanding all the dramas, understanding our attachment and our anger and our fears, understanding our own love and compassion. That's a very internal job, Deborah. They call that the wisdom wing. And then the more you put yourself together, then you're more qualified. So when you are with others and help others, you don't lose the plot. So the wisdom wing then is the ability to distinguish between attachment and your own fears and your own anger. So what happens now, for example, let's say your loved one, let's say it's your child or whoever, it doesn't matter, a loved one. Doesn't matter, whoever it is, a loved one is very sick. So what happens is, what we don't realize, using again the Buddhist view of the mind, that's compassion. Now that's brilliant. That's a really powerful state of mind. Compassion is empathy with another's suffering, and even more so the wish to help. That's so clean and so marvelous. But we don't realize, Deborah, that that's mixed with and polluted by our neediness, our attachment, our fears. Because attachment, you see, another way of putting attachment is it's this junkie in us that only can bear the nice things. It wants everything to be lovely. Think of this one. Attachment wants everything to be lovely. So attachment part of us, which is neurotic, can't stand the thought of our friend being sick because it disturbs us. We freak out. You get my point here? So that's what pollutes the compassion. And then we get all neurotic and fearful. Oh my God, she's going to die. What am I going to do? I'm not capable. I can't do it. And so our compassion goes downhill. But if you've got much more solid compassion and you're less attachment, you're able to stay focused and really see what's best for that person. And you will not lose the plot. You'll be much more clear and more courageous, and you'll be more persevering. But attachment is, when it's strong, it's either attachment to, it's mainly the biggest attachment, more than what we're saying is the most, another way of putting attachment. Forget about people approving of us, forget about sex or drugs. It's the craving every second for things to be nice, everything to be lovely. So when we're like that, we can't stand problems. Attachment can't cope with problems. So if you're lessening your attachment, you're able to bear the problem and not go crazy. You get my point, Deborah? That's the key to success. It's hard work.
Yes. Thank you, Robina.
And the bodhisattvas are so courageous in their compassion. No matter how much suffering they see, that doesn't freak them out. It freaks us out. We want to go away, or wish it would go away, or punch it in the nose. That gives them more courage to never give up, because they have this enthusiasm, because they're working on their own mind. They've lessened their own attachment. They want to keep going to be of benefit to others. And you know yourself that if you start freaking out, if your grandma's in hospital and you start to have burst into tears and cry, you're dragging grandma down with you. She needs you to be strong and stable and unemotional, but loving and kind, so that you give her confidence that it's okay. That's the point. Do you understand my point?
Yes, but
Good.
it's so hard to
Yes.
detach.
It is, darling. Don't say detached. Don't use that word. I think
Okay.
detached sounds like you're becoming cold. It doesn't mean that. It means less fearful, less anxious, less angry, less worried. That's not easy to do, but that's the analysis of it. And that's why we have to have our own daily practice first, where we learn to be clear and learn to get become more stable. Then our compassion is more powerful. Of course, it's difficult, sweetheart. We're but that's what the practice is. That's where the meeting point of, okay, I'm going to work on my mind and become a better person and less attached and less neurotic. Then our compassion is cleaner. But it's step by step, Deborah.
Thank you. I like the word less.
Good. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Good. Thank you, Deborah. Who else, people?
I have a question, Robina.
Yes.
So just dealing with my mom. She's going to die soon, and
Where is your mum, darling? Are you with her, or is she far away?
yeah, I'm with her.
Far away. You're with your mummy.
Yeah,
You're in Las Vegas, or you're with her where she is.
in Southern California.
Okay, darling. So go on, talk about it, sweetheart. Talk about it, Vanessa.
So she's at the point where she can't communicate because she has brain cancer.
Oh, sweetheart.
I'm trying my best not to be emotional.
It's okay. Be emotional right now. You're not with your mummy. It's okay. Talk about it.
And I just want to, when the time comes that she passes, I just want to be able to, because I'm really afraid of just like being really emotionally.
Of course, darling. But you've got the Buddhist view. So what are you doing to help your mummy now? Are you having prayers done at Kopan? Are you doing medicine Buddha? Is she hearing mantras? Is she a Buddhist? Does she like the Buddhist things, Vanessa?
Yeah, she goes to temples.
So how are you playing mantras for your mother next to her?
I'm not.
You're not.
I've been doing when I was away from her, when she was in the hospital, I was doing medicine Buddha.
But why don't you play? She's a Buddhist, so why aren't you having? This is as Lama Zopa says, if you've got Lama Zopa's book, this is a powerful way you can help your mummy, darling, even when she's in a coma and can't communicate. She's got to hear the sound of the mantras. They're so powerful, and because she has a connection with the Buddhas, you must have this all the time. Is that a possibility where she is? Can you organize that on an iPad, very low, right next to her, quietly, all the time? You can't wish to do better for her, Vanessa.
Okay, I'll do that.
It's incredibly important, darling. And she wants that. Her poor little mind is all over the place now, because even most of us can't sort our minds out. But there's your mummy really sick and she can't communicate, and she's probably on drugs. But the mantras go in very deep. I can't stress this strong enough, Vanessa. And because she's a Buddhist and you're a Buddhist, this is perfect for you and perfect for her. You can't do better for her, darling. Can you get that organized? I would suggest that's the first thing you can do, and that'll make you feel better because you know you're doing something to help your mummy.
Okay.
Understand, darling? And you email me to and leave me her name, and we can get some prayers done. And I'll do medicine Buddha for her as well. But it's not just when you're with her. You can also feel better right now by knowing you are doing something for your mother while you're not there. But then when you are there, you'll have more courage and you will be able to help her. Don't you worry. But she needs to be hearing these mantras right now, sweetheart.
Okay, thank you.
Is she on her own in the hospital, or is she in a ward, or what?
No, she's at home. She's at home.
Oh, she's at home with you.
Yeah.
She's you. All right. My goodness, Vanessa, go get your iPad, organize it, set it up. Sweetheart, go into, I will send you a link when we finished. I'll send you a link. There's a beautiful video. There's a video of Lama Zopa singing the Medicine Buddha, and you have it on very quietly. You can't do better for your mother. I promise you. Because mantras go in very deep. There are so many stories of people. I've had experiences myself too. When you're unconscious even, you get the mantra, the sound is there. And because she's got faith in the Buddhas, this will be beneficial for her mind. You can't do more for her right now. Can you hear that? And then when you're with her, you have your weeping outside, but when you're with her, she needs you to be, even if she's unconscious, she needs you to be strong and calm, and you be just simply saying Medicine Buddha. But let her hear them all the time, darling. Then you're happy. Even when you're in bed, you know she's getting blessed.
Okay.
You don't need the burden of guilt, sweetheart.
Okay.
Does this make sense, darling?
Yeah, it does. It's really overwhelming because I've just never thought it would be like this.
What, sweetheart?
It was just, I don't know. This is just new to me to have someone so close to me, at this point.
Right. I understand. Have you got Lama Zopa's book? Have you read it ever? Did I ever send it to you? Have you bought it?
I have the link. I can look it up. I can download it.
You mean the one that I gave you at some point?
Um,
The new version out now called How to Face Death Without Fear. But I've got an old version, and I can easily send you that. And just in your spare time, darling, just have a look at some of, you'll see by the chapter headings exactly what's relevant to you at the moment.
Okay.
Because you like the Buddhist teaching, so use these to help you become more grounded and more. But it's a good experience for you, and she relies on you, so you do everything. So the simplest way to help her, like I said, it's not easy. You can't make it all go away. You can't take away her pain, but you can help her mind, darling, and that should give you great courage.
Okay, I'll email you for the.
Email me, sweetheart, and I'll send it to you, and I'll give you some other advice as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa, darling. Thank you so much. Who else, people? Anybody else? Something else to say?
I have a question.
Good. Talk to me.
You spoke about pleasures as being a kind of a delicious feeling.
That's
a
right.
Strong, yes, but could you say something about the psychology and if it works similarly when it comes to aversions? If people have strong aversions.
Yes.
Could you say something a little bit about the psychology of aversions?
Exactly. So there's two things. There's the deluded state. There's three things, three kinds of states of mind. What's your name? I'm Joel.
Yes.
Okay. Three kinds of states of mind. There are those that are neurotic, I-based, fear-based, worried, angry, jealous, attached, depressed, all of these. We're very familiar with those words. They're the neurotic ones. And that's not been putting us down. They're the ones that cause us suffering. They're the ones that are distorted, and they're all based on the wrong sense of I. That's the Buddha's analysis. Then you've got the virtuous qualities, the love, the kindness, the compassion, the intelligence. They're great. The more of those, the better. Now, the third lot, these are like the mechanics of the mind, and that's where pleasant and unpleasant feeling. We only have three kinds of feelings. Feeling is a term, not a synonym of emotion in Buddhist psychology. Feeling is in the third category where you've got intention, attention, concentration, good memory. These are the mechanics of the mind that you need to function. So feeling, oddly enough, is one of those. It's neither good nor bad. It's just the way we're built. So when we know very well, when we meet an object of attachment, Joel, like the chocolate cake, and we're attached to it and we get all excited, that triggers a pleasant feeling, and we like the pleasant feelings. It's called happiness. So then when you meet let's say you've got an allergy to chocolate cakes, and now that when you see it, it arises aversion, which is the second delusion. Attachment gives rise to aversion. We go between attachment and anger, or attachment and aversion 1,000 times a day. So attachment over exaggerates the delicious thing about something, and that triggers pleasant feelings. Anger or aversion over exaggerates the ugly things about somebody or something, and that triggers unpleasant feelings. You with me? You understand the point? We have pleasant, we're running 1,000 times a day between attachment and anger, and then pleasant and unpleasant feelings. So Buddha's telling us in a deeper way, it's the wrong connection, because we assume the chocolate cake is the cause of the pleasant feelings. That's why we keep eating the chocolate cake. But eventually it'll cause unpleasant feelings because you eat too much of it. So you can't win, you know. But aversion is a stronger level of aversion is anger. How dare you do that to me? I'm going to kill you, blah. A milder level of aversion, Amjol, is like irritation, upset, annoyed, frustrated. And then a subtler level of aversion, which builds up, is called guilt or despair or depression. These are all aspects of aversion. And aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And aversion triggers unpleasant feelings. And then, or even first, even you could argue the unpleasant feeling comes first, then aversion kicks in and thinks it's horrible, thinks the object is horrible. You with me? Does that make sense? You got that?
Yes, I think so.
So that, I mean, there's a lot of words in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to unpack.
Yeah, we've got to sort of first establish the neurotic states of mind. Attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of the thing. And that comes along with pleasant feelings, which we call happiness. Then aversion, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, when you get the wrong cake, or the girlfriend says the wrong word, or the sound is too loud, then unpleasant feeling is triggered, then aversion kicks in. So the feeling comes first, then aversion kicks in. So if you taste cake thinking it's chocolate cake, but it's carrot cake, and your expectations are not met, you'll get a big shock, and you'll get an unpleasant feeling and then aversion to it. You understand? It's all very quick.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. And it's so quick, Amjol, that's the problem. And that's why we have to learn to get concentration in meditation, so we can start to slow the process down and see it more precisely. That's the main reason we have to really start. That's the real work we have to do. You know? What else, people?
I have a question in the chat box, Venerable Robina.
Okay.
The question is, so where's the line between throwing yourself into the samsara pleasures versus just enjoying? Say a piece of cake or a love relationship, not guided by delusion.
That's right. Lessening attachment, lessening expectation, lessening emotional hunger, lessening neediness, which means slowly realizing, you know, learning to be content, learning to be fulfilled now with what I have and with what I am. That doesn't bring you to become complacent. You can still grow and become a better person, but you're lessening the emotional hunger. When you lessen emotional hunger, which is attachment, you get more pleasure, more satisfaction, more kindness, more love, and more connectedness with another human being. The more attachments there, I mean, if there's not much in a relationship, if there's mainly attachment, but not much love and compassion, then it won't last. Because after a while, you get bored with him. You think, who's this boring guy in my bed? You'll chuck him out and get another one. If there's only mainly attachment there, the little bit of love that is there won't last, because attachment is so fierce. And the second he doesn't do what your attachment wants and anger arises, you'll eventually hate him. So the virtue, the kindness, the compassion, the wisdom, they're the good qualities. And we have to learn to grow those. And they will only be able to grow when we lessen the attachment and the emotional hunger and the neediness, and grow and lessen the aversion and the irritation and the depression, and lessen the anxiety, all of those ones. It's a tough job, but that's the relationship between them. It's a gradual process. And that demands awareness of your own mind, being your own therapist, day by day by day by day.
That was my question. I just have a follow-up.
Yes, Ali.
It's just, what happens? How do I differentiate? I understand the lesson, the attachment, but you said that as you become better at that, the attachment dissolves.
That's right.
More pleasure with things. My question is now, how during my practice, start to recognize, how am I being less attached? And I'm having more pleasure feelings and good. How do I recognize that I'm doing well and not?
Okay, Aline, this is a really simple question, and the answer is so simple that you'll be almost embarrassed that you didn't know the answer. You're telling me that you're learning to play Bach's music, okay? You're learning to play music, and you're asking me, Robina, how can I tell if I'm playing it right? I mean, what the hell do you think is the method you'd use to know whether you're playing the right music or the wrong? No, spell it out. Tell me the method you'd use to be confident you're playing the right music.
Well, I would say that I realized that
No,
I'm,
you missed the
yeah,
point. It's so,
no.
no, it's so simple. You're missing it. You
Go on.
lift your, listen to me, you're on the piano and you lift your eyes and you look at the notation on your piano. You look at Bach's music written in front of you and you check that you played the right note. Well, here, Bach's music in this framework here is Buddha's teachings. You know, you learn anything, sweetheart. How do I know if I've got my mathematics right? How do you know if you're doing the garden right? Because you have botanical theory, you have musical theory, you have mathematical theory. You don't just look inside, am I playing the music right? I'll just be intuitive. You wonder, am I sowing the right seed in the garden? That's how stupid we are when it comes to spiritual, because we don't think there's any technology there. We don't think there are any valid theories about the mind. So this is the point, sweetheart. You'll only know if you're lessening attachment and growing love by knowing what attachment is and what love is. And how do you know that? This is Buddha's analysis, not Jung's or Freud. You can use them if you like. So you're playing Bach's music. So you check against Bach's music if you're playing the right piano. You check against the botany instructions if you're planting the right seed. Can you see the point or not?
I do, but different from music or
I can't
whatever.
hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, now better.
The difference is here, I think, well, because this is so subjective. We're talking about
I know.
right? Because it's so subjective.
I understand.
I have to check with myself if the love I'm having for this person is just attachment or I'm growing out of it.
Okay, you didn't hear my answer, Aline. You haven't quite got the answer. I'm not being arrogant to you.
No,
It is.
no.
The principle is exactly the same. The difficulty is more difficult. Of course it's difficult, but there's an assumption in what you said, which is the assumption we have in the West, that subjectivity can't be trusted. That's Buddha's entire point. When you've got single-pointed concentration, you can see your own mind with absolute clear objectivity. We don't have that view in our culture.
True. I think that's the point.
That's the point, darling. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you've got to learn to get that.
I'm on it. I'm working on it.
You're doing wonderful. No question. Thank you, Arlene. That's great. What else, folks?
I have one more question in the chat box, then about Robina.
Mm-hmm.
So one student is asking, my oldest child has left to live his life in another state, and my wife and I are feeling empty nest syndrome. I've noticed that I've been able to find some balance in this, letting go of attachment, but I'm beginning to think that I look uncaring in my wife's interpretation. I'm in pain and missing terribly, but my practice allows me to be centered. How do I reconcile this? And also, my wife's not a Buddhist, FYI.
I understand exactly. This is the big danger. This is the danger of when we are beginning to practice, and we are got our own analysis. You've got the analysis of karma, you've got the analysis of impermanence, you understand your mind, you understand attachment, and you are working on it. So you're becoming more stable. So that can be interpreted in our world as you're being cold-hearted and not caring. And that is the problem. So you've got to first check that you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because one of the commonest misconceptions is if you give up attachment, you become indifferent. No, you're becoming more stable, and your words seem to indicate me you're on the right track. But then you just have to be not worry what your wife thinks, just be extra loving and kind to her, and keep your quietness to yourself. Don't walk around looking like you're a zombie. Don't walk around looking like you don't care. Don't give too many lectures about it. You just be loving and kind and agree with her when she says what she says, and don't sort of and just be what she needs, and you keep your own stuff completely in your own mind. You understand I hope you understand what I'm saying. You can easily sort of wear it too much on out. We can wear it like a badge a little bit, and you should be completely hidden and just be what your wife needs you to be.
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much. It needs a lot of skill to not, you understand what I'm saying. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Yeah, but just be extra loving and kind to your wife. That's the main thing. Be what she needs you to be. And meanwhile, you keep your stuff in your own heart. And you can give example. I mean, when she's open, without being a lecturer, you can give example by being more stable. And you can just even talk, don't say it's like Buddha's teachings, but you can even talk about, it's really interesting is that things change. And we because we don't like this, because we want our little boy to be, you can talk about it in a very casual, kind way as a conversation, and not like as a lecture. And that can be when her mind is open and ready and wants to hear it. Do you understand? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Good. So much. Well, I think it's time to go home again. Our little hour gone by. A bit of information. It's been helpful for me, getting some things clarified. So thank you very much for listening. And we just keep moving, everybody, every day, according to our pace, according to our levels, according to our capacity, one little step at a time, based in confidence. That's what I find so powerful reading Lama Yeshe's books. He just gives you incredible confidence. He makes the teaching so delicious. He makes us see it's possible. And we need that. We need to sustain our own confidence. We need to have that. That's just, and like whether it's Vanessa's point or, or Vanessa's point or Deborah's point, all the same variations, all of these things. We need to have confidence and courage and go one step at a time, for our sake and the sake of others. Thank you, precious ones. Everybody, thank you so much. Much, much love. And keep moving and never give up. And I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Jang chob sem chogra poche. Ma ke panam ke gyuchi. Ke pa nyam pa me pa yang. Gong ne gong du pa ba sho. Now maybe just for Vanessa's mummy and everybody else, let's just sing some medicine Buddha mantras. So just thinking whoever you want to think of who's sick and dying, because this is reality. Vanessa's mummy. What's her name, sweetheart?
Loy.
Loy.
Yes.
Okay, we imagine Loy. We imagine everybody we think of, all the people who are suffering and dying from COVID, all these things. And we just sing a few times. We imagine the medicine Buddha. He looks like the regular Buddha in the sky, dark blue, and he's pouring down like light into every single sick person, into Loy, into all the others, blessing. There's energy of enlightened as in the aspect of healing, We all need this too. Lama Zopa says it's one of the most powerful practices, not just for healing, but for everything. So we imagine pouring in and healing our own pain and our suffering, healing our own fears, healing Loy, healing everybody, healing everybody. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. Taya taom bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze, ranza samungate svaha. All right, people. Never give up, sweethearts. Much, much love, everybody. Thank you.